forum. So welcome tonight. I get the honor of introducing our speaker. Our topic tonight is calming the chaos of supply chain, which I know none of us on this call have that in our daily lives. So yay. So I am really looking forward to John. His name is John Melbye. He has a DDP, a DDOP, a DDLP, a DDDP, a CSCP. He's been in supply chain for the last 8 years, creating analogies and exploring the causes of supply chain chaos. With that, I want to welcome John to our forum tonight as our speaker. I'm going to just pass that on over to John. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm excited to see what I've put together. Have you ever had one of those days where everything went perfectly and you had no issues at all? Of course you haven't. Nobody has. Stupid question. So my day turned out to be very full of distractions, and hopefully I finished the presentation before the start here. All right, so my company is called Become Demand Driven. It focused on the demand driven methodology. If you've heard of demand driven MRP, it's part of what we're going to talk about, but we're really going to focus on kind of what's wrong with our basic approach to supply chain. And again, it's not entirely wrong, but there's these little pieces that I feel like we're not quite getting to the bottom of. And that's where I want to spend the time. So if I can figure out how to advance my own slides, there we go. So this is going to be called Calming the Chaos of Supply Chain. And there's a lot of different ways I could have approached this, but I've decided to pick one of the things that I think is important. And there's Kelly went through kind of about me. I'm involved with the ASCM Twin Cities chapter here in Minneapolis. By the way, I'm based in Minneapolis. I have my series of letters after my name. I'm also, in addition to consulting and training, I also provide a software that does what we train on. So if it's necessary to have an additional tool, we have that. And I love doing these presentations, and I love hearing questions from people and understanding, did my message resonate? Did it not resonate? And just understanding, is this really helpful? And I'm trying my best to be conversational. So there may be times when I will ask a question tonight. Please unmute and answer, or chime in the chat or something. I won't wait forever and put you on the spot, but there may be times when I ask a question, and sometimes they're rhetorical and sometimes they're not. I may or may not tell you which one is which. So the questions that triggered me to put this together, I spent years in supply chain not really understanding why we had so much chaos. Everything was always firefighting. We were always expediting. No matter what we did, there was something that we didn't have, and it was very unusual to have the day go perfectly and everything lined up and we did all the things we tried to do. In fact, sometimes things went so perfectly that we did more than we intended to do, which in turn then caused me to have chaos and firefighting the next day. So even when things went perfectly or went a little bit too well, we still weren't ready for the next day. And I term that as kind of accidental success. It's not intentional. It's sometimes it works out, but it's not perfect. So why do we have these tools? We have expensive tools, and they don't seem to be improving the situation. And we find ourselves in this really weird space of having these tools that aren't really helping, or aren't helping the way we think they should. And this is a recent revelation for me. I boiled this one down maybe a month ago, maybe a couple months. Christmas made time fly kind of fast, but we've got a conflict in the way we think about our supply chains. And the conflict boils down to, we try very hard to make precise plans over relatively long periods of time because our lead times are long. And maybe that long period of time is only 3 weeks or 3 months or something like that. But we try to make precise plans and we schedule those plans and everything lines up perfectly. But at the same time, we're fully aware that those plans are not going to happen like we think they are. We're going to have to continuously adjust and regularly course correct. And so I call it chaos by design. We've created a situation where we create a precise plan, knowing full well that that precise plan is not going to happen. And then we're upset when we have to make adjustments, even though we knew from the start we were going to have to make adjustments. And eventually your head starts to hurt trying to follow that circle around. And if we know the plans go out the window once we start executing, why do we spend so much time on planning and so little time preparing for what I call agile execution? And the reality is, it's called MRP, right? Material Requirements Planning. That's why we spend so much time planning, because it's a planning engine. That's all it does is planning. So if things don't go as planned, the only real chance you have is to replan. And this was kind of a realization statement that I think aligns that what's comic about this is that there's something that's keeping us from succeeding. And it sounds a lot like what I just kind of talked through, that the tool we're using doesn't really have a way to manage all the chaos. And so what do you do when the thing that's keeping you from succeeding also seems to be the thing that's keeping you from failing? Because without MRP, we would be I don't know where we would be. So it's absolutely required. At the same time, it seems to be part of the problem. And if you've ever been on a ladder and got yourself a little bit higher than you were prepared for, and the ladder starts slipping, your reaction, my reaction, is to hang on to that ladder for dear life. But the only way to save yourself is to let go of the ladder and grab onto something else. And it just kind of feels like that sometimes, that we're really kind of at a loss as to what we are supposed to be doing. So what I picked to talk about tonight is the 5 functions of inventory. I had 4 functions of inventory until I started putting this together, and I came up with a 5th one. So maybe we can stretch this out to be the full 3-hour session that Jody told me I had. No, wrong crowd. Okay, we won't be 3 hours.
Now, don't be getting me in trouble, John. Come on.
All right. So the 5 functions of inventory, I'm just going to get them all on the screen here. We're going to talk about each one of these. But I think the first one, I think everybody can agree on that that's really where we're focused when we think about inventory. And we'll talk about that. But the last 4, I think, are understood, but maybe not really known what to do about it. So let's talk about this 5 functions of inventory. The first one is cost reduction opportunity. I think, is anybody on the call not being asked to reduce your overall inventory? It's a pretty common goal or directive from leadership. Why? Because we have working capital tied up in inventory. And we look at that pile and say, man, there's $10 million in inventory here. If we could reduce that to 9 million, we'd save, get the calculator out, carry the 7, we would save $1 million. That's a lot. So it's fairly easy pickings to say, let's reduce the amount of inventory because that's a way for us to get money back into our bank account. So there's a little bit of nonsense that goes with that, at least in my experience, where everybody, the underlying assumption is that we have too much inventory. but we don't really have a way to measure that or to know for sure. So leadership says, hey, reduce the inventory level because that'll free up capital. But if we don't have enough inventory to start with, that creates a bit of a problem. We can't reduce if we don't have enough already. And if we don't have a target inventory, we don't know what to reduce to. And it's impossible to reduce the total inventory. The only way to do it is to reduce the individual parts inventory. And then that leads us, because we're under pressure, to pick the high dollar items. But in my experience, the high dollar items were the ones I was short of, because those are the ones that I'm already trying to keep a minimum of. So it just becomes kind of a nonsense situation where we're trying to reduce inventory and we agree we need to reduce inventory, but how do we reduce that inventory and how far do we reduce it? That becomes part of this nonsense. And so we end up with this is kind of my chart to show how traditional MRP works. We have a requirement date. And based on our lead times, we order everything so that it shows up exactly, precisely when we need it. And you could argue that we can manipulate the system and we can move it a day or two, but basically MRP says if you need it 2 weeks from now on Thursday, that's when the due date is going to be. Or maybe it'll be the day before, but it's all going to be tied to that due date. And of course, the underlying piece is that if we order exactly what we need, when we need it, produce our product and ship it out to the customer, we will have a minimal amount of inventory. And if that were true, all of your stock rooms would be empty, but they're not. So clearly this isn't exactly how it's working. And there's a lot of reasons for that we won't go into, but the underlying assumption is that we will be able to schedule everything precisely and nothing will go wrong, and therefore we will have the least amount of inventory possible. The biggest problem is we measure the amount of inventory we have on the last day of the month, not and which has nothing to do with the requirement dates or the shipment dates or the arrival dates or anything like that. So we're taking a snapshot in time that's not connected to this piece that looks like it should work. And yet, I think most of us are in situations where we're still being yelled at because we have too much inventory. So something isn't lining up there. All right, now I'm going to switch because that first one is really a function of inventory. It's really just the amount of inventory and this push to reduce inventory. But now I want to add a word here, and I'm going to talk about the functions of inventory positioning. And the first one, which was the second in my list, was lead time reduction. And I don't know if anybody's been involved in a lead time reduction project. I don't know that I ever in my career got in at the beginning of it. And maybe I wasn't even smart enough at the time to really see what was happening. But every lead time reduction project that I've been aware of seems to end up being about reducing the lead time from our suppliers. Does anybody disagree with that? Is that kind of not where those go? Give you a moment to unmute. Is there agreement there? Lead time reduction tends to focus on supplier lead time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that confirmation, because some of these things I really don't know. And thanks, Beth. Sometimes it's also about production lead time, right? But it's kind of about the production, the raw materials, the production side. And my realization at some point, and I don't know if this is in company strategies, but lead time reduction should be, I thought, about reducing the lead time to the customer. And so if I can reduce the lead time to the customer, now I have a benefit value, right? I could charge more if I could do it quicker. But if I change the lead time from my supplier, what do? Sometimes I have to pay more to get that lead time reduced. So how is that benefiting the company? Anyway, I'll let you guys figure that out amongst yourselves. My point is lead time reduction tends to get focused on the supplier. I think we should be trying to impact the lead time to the customer. So just to kind of clarify lead time, this is a slide from one of our simulations that we do. We create Lego penguins, which is not how it's done in nature, but we use Legos to create a penguin, which ends up looking a little bit like a penguin if you use your imagination. And we understand here, this is a simple one with a handful of parts and a 7-day lead time to create this finished penguin. So lead time, what do we know about lead time? We have our purchase lead time. So to purchase this 3x2 orange brick is a 3-day purchase lead time. The 2x1 white brick is a 2-day lead time. And you can see all the way through here, all of the purchase parts are purchase lead time. The subassembled parts are the subassembly lead times. And then our lead time to the customer is 1 day. And we have, so the purchase lead time, we have the subassembly lead times or the manufactured lead times, and then we have the cumulative lead time, which will be the longest length in the chain. So 3 days plus 3 days plus 1 day, that's 7 days as my longest lead time to make a penguin if I have nothing to start with. And in this case, if I can reduce the lead time, of this part, the 3x1, from 2 days to 1 day, have I changed my lead time to my customer? No, my cumulative lead time is still 7 days. So not every lead time reduction actually has an impact on what we're trying to change. Only the longest lead time in this case would cause a reduction. So if we were going to focus on lead time reduction with our supplier, we better be focused on this chain until such time as another chain becomes longer. And the reason that I think inventory positioning can be a lead time reduction tool is illustrated by, frankly, every restaurant on the planet. But if we look at this one, which we'll call this a burger joint, a little graphic put together by my friend Diego down in Colombia. Every fast food restaurant, every restaurant works the same, don't they? They have inventory in their kitchen that allows them to make whatever the customer asks for in a reasonable amount of time. No one has ever walked into a McDonald's and said, I'd like a Big Mac 31 days from now. It's never happened, never going to happen. But the fact that they positioned inventory, and I doubt that the McDonald's folks would say it like that, the fact that they positioned inventory in their kitchen is what allows them to meet the customer demand. And we're only going to talk about inventory positioning, but resource positioning is kind of a similar thing. If you have inventory but no people cooking, you're going to have trouble. So do you have enough stove, oven, fryers, whatever the things are? Do you have enough people? Those all play a role as well. But if you don't have the inventory, it also doesn't matter whether or not you have people working the fries. It's not going to matter. So inventory positioning is what allows the customer to get their sandwich in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever that minimal lead time is on for a restaurant. Not different than retail, right? Can you imagine going into a retail store that has zero inventory on the shelves? Of course not. The only reason retail exists is so we can walk in, get what we want, and walk out with it, which means they have to have inventory there. Again, inventory positioning is what allows me to walk into a Menards or a Lowe's or a Home Depot and get something quickly if they have it. If they don't have it, they lose the sale because I need it now, usually. So, and that introduces another kind of lead time here, but we're not going to talk about that in this slide. Okay, so lead time reduction, a function of inventory positioning. And frankly, let's go back to this one. If I maintain a level of inventory of any of these individual parts, it's based on the lead time up until that. And so my inventory reduction project can be influenced by the lead time from my supplier. But my lead time reduction project then becomes a way to reduce the inventory I hold, not a way to reduce the lead time or improve the lead time to my customer. So it disconnects and creates two separate projects that are related but not directly connected. Okay. The next one, inventory positioning, has to do with managing the impact of the bullwhip. And hopefully we all know the bullwhip, a small change in one end of the supply chain that results in a large change in another end of the supply chain as we try and accommodate or make up for that change, those changes that happen. So we go back to our penguin here and we think about in a bill of materials, we have exactly what it takes to make up the penguin. We have 2 of some parts, we have 1 of other parts, and we have the days that it takes to make them. But the underlying piece, sorry, I'm accidentally moving my slides around. The underlying piece of this is the bullwhip, because in traditional planning, all of these things are directly connected. And what that means is we've got a 7-day window as our maximum piece here. And that 7-day window, if I punch all my pieces through, this is my 7-day window over here. And we talked about this already. My cumulative lead time is the 7 days. If there is a change within those 7 days of the demand, either the quantity or the due date, either change means everything else on here has to change. And if it's within the 7 days, if it's 7 days or 6 days, it's going to impact over here. If it's 5, 4, or 3 days, within 5, 4, or 3 days, it's going to impact everything else. But everything has to change every time there is a change because of the way traditional MRP explosions happen. And then the bullwhip impact, if we are regularly facing a change, we're going to hold more inventory to try and manage those changes. So inventory becomes our way of dealing with the bullwhip and the changes that we face from our customers or from our suppliers. So if we can't put inventory everywhere, but we can put inventory in strategic places. And so in this example, we've put inventory in 2 places, these 2x2 yellow bricks that go into the heads subassembly, and the feet, the finished assembled feet, subassembled feet, we've put a buffer. We've said we're going to hold inventory here and here. And those 2 things change our time frame that we need to worry about. Now we're down to 4 days. And our flexibility, if there's a change, because the feet are the same for every penguin, if there's a change, we don't have to worry about which penguin is, I wanted the black ones, now I want the brown ones, doesn't matter, the feet are the same. And this 2x2 heads is the same no matter what the rest of it is. So now I've got a 4-day window that I need to react to instead of a 7-day window that I need to react to. And to my earlier point, we have now got a 6-day lead time to make this subassembled feet, but that 6-day lead time is to make this. And it doesn't react to the changes in the final demand. It just reacts to the changes in this subassembly. So it disconnects the chaos from one side to the other. And so what ends up happening is, because we put a buffer here in the feed assembly, we still have variability. We still have kind of chaos coming at us, but the buffer at the feed assembly and the buffer at this 2x2 brick stops the bullwhip from continuing. But we still have the bullwhip happening here, and it's the amplification and transference of that variability through the supply chain that causes us trouble, all the way back to our final assembly, where we're going to be in trouble. But it's a 4-day window, not a 7-day window. And if we still find that this is too much variability, we can put buffers in other places, and we can use resource buffers and time buffers as well. But this talk is about inventory. So we could put inventory in other places to maintain this, and then intentionally increase certain levels of inventory, knowing that that's going to help us be less chaotic in our supply chains. The fourth piece for inventory positioning I want to talk about is about defining our capability. And it becomes interesting, there's so many times, I'm sure you guys have even thought it here. Hey, we're not a restaurant. So the restaurant example is kind of interesting, but we're not a restaurant. But we can learn something from what happens at a restaurant. Capability. Think about the same thing with the restaurant. If I have enough hamburgers to make, if I have enough beef patties to make 100 hamburgers, that's my capability. If 2 bus loads pull up, there's a likelihood I'm going to overrun that capability. And based on history, if I have bus loads coming in regularly, I'm going to change my capability, which is defined by how much inventory I'm holding. What else can we think of where we start with capability? We talked a little bit about restaurants. What about hotels? Hotels don't add rooms as they get overbooked. There's a capacity that they create by having a certain number of rooms. Restaurants do the same thing. Stadiums do the same thing. Anytime you've built something, you've built trying to align with a capacity. Airplanes and flight routes, the positioning of which planes are flying which routes is a statement of our capability. And don't get me started on the overselling of airplane seats, but that's how many people can travel. And then the other one that I love to use as an example is Thanksgiving dinner, or weddings, or any kind of celebrations. You don't invite 200 people to your house for Thanksgiving dinner, I don't think, because you don't have the kitchen capacity, you don't have the seating capacity. At least in this area, it's winter, so you can't just move outdoors to a standing party. So you base on your ability to make the dinner and seat people, you create, that creates your capability. And yes, you could say, well, I'm going to have this hosted at a different location where they have capacity for 100 people. Great. That's a way to do it. But that's, again, positioning of resources to be able to meet some extraordinary demand. Similarly, we look at weddings or graduation parties. We have a limited number of guests. So what's the limit based on? Well, it might be based on the number of people you think you might invite. It might be based on budget. If somebody's paying for it and they say, hey, we can afford 100 guests, that's all we can afford, let's keep it to that, right? These are the things that impact us. But we start with our capability, and then we do all the rest of the stuff. And to me, inventory is one of the key pieces that defines our capability. And then the last one is creating agility. And I could probably go on for, well, not the full 3 hours, but in my history, we've been talking about creating agility and being more agile for years and years and years and years. And I don't know, this is the joy of the world I live in, is I have the time to sit here and think, what does that mean? Are we being agile? Is there anything we're doing that will help us be more agile? And I can't think of it. And from my own history, the idea was that we're going to tell you to change everything tomorrow, so be agile. Well, me accepting your change isn't the definition of agility. I have no choice but to say, well, okay, the customer wants it a day sooner. But it doesn't make me more agile. It just makes me more frustrated. So inventory is what allows us to think in terms of agility. I can react. If I start with capability from the last bullet point, then I can create agility based on what I've got. Now, this is a series, a couple of slides that I've used in the past, but hopefully it's not something everybody has seen. This is something called a evaporating cloud or a conflict cloud. Has anybody heard of that before or seen one of these before or used one?
No.
All right, thanks for that. I recommend you explore this. It is a very interesting and powerful tool. Back when I was working between the couple of places I've worked, we talked about lean. We had all kinds of problem solving tools. We had the A3s, we had the Kaizens, we had the fishbone diagrams, we had all of that stuff, and nobody in my memory, nobody ever talked about this conflict cloud. So the conflict cloud works like this. You start with a common objective and you keep working your way down until you find where the conflict is. And in my limited experience with this, it's always been about finding the conflict and then picking which side wins, who's right. And this became fascinating to me, I don't know, a year or so ago when I figured this out. If we want to start with successful inventory management, I think there's two paths to doing it. One is always having enough, and the other is to have exactly precisely what's required. And if we always have enough, that's really kind of starting with this capability and allows us to be independent and proactive. Because we can say, hey, I want to have 10% more of this, and that way I will always have enough. And the other side says the requirement was for 50 pieces, get exactly 50 pieces. If that 50 changes to 51, you're screwed. If it changes to 49, you've got one left over, and now don't know for sure what to do with that. But at the end, this is where the conflict is. We've got an independent approach and a dependent approach. And one accounts for variability, and one assumes that we will have no or very low variability. But what struck me about this is it's not about which side wins and which side loses. The goal is to resolve the conflict. So it's not about figuring out which way is right. It's figuring out how can we do both. And I don't know if anybody in the conflict cloud resolution world has figured that out, but that's where I landed. How can we do both? Because both of them have valid points. And you could argue that that's the case with almost everything, right? There is not a one size fits all thing in the world, though we try and believe it, right? Our organization was focused on lean. Don't talk to me about theory of constraints. We are a lean shop. I can't have two different ideas at the same time. Really? This is how the world is working. We need to have two different things possible at the same time. Now, enter DDMRP. DDMRP, and we haven't really talked about this, but you can imagine those inventory positions that we talked about in the penguin scenario. We have some items that have strategically positioned inventory that are independently managed, and that allows agile execution. For the parts where we don't have a buffer, we've created the separate planning horizons where traditional planning can work in between the inventory positions, and that allows precise execution. So we no longer have a conflict here because both of these paths naturally exist within the demand-driven MRP model. So we don't have to pick one or the other. Inside of one model, we get both. And that to me is the power of inventory. It allows us to be precise in between the inventory and less precise or more agile and independent at those positions of inventory. And of course, the caveat is that we don't have, we can't absorb unlimited amount of variability, but it's what we can absorb is defined by those inventory positions. So I go back to my question. What do you do when the thing keeping you from succeeding seems to also be the thing that is keeping you from failing? Well, we find a way to incorporate multiple things so that the thing that seems to be keeping us from succeeding becomes part of the thing that is helping us to succeed. And the base takeaway from all of this is that I look at inventory and the positioning of that inventory is not a lever for improvement, it's the lever for improvement. And when we realize that, we change from the demand first model that we're all stuck in, where we first look at the demand and then we try and scramble to make the inventory line up with that demand. Instead, let's start with capability first and say, here's the amount of inventory I'm going to start with, and I can react to everything. The demand changes. I need to know it, absolutely. But first is capability, and then the demand becomes secondary. And it's a subtle change, but I think this is really the most important flip in the way we think about our inventory and the way we think about our supply chains. Stop trying so hard to predict what that demand is going to be, and instead start by saying, I need the ability to make 100 of these a day. Maybe it becomes 120, maybe it becomes 80, but this is my capability. And then we're going to handle the demand and look for fluctuations, but only look for fluctuations that outrun my capability. I'm not defining my capability every time I take an order from a customer. And I think that's the message I want to leave you with, is that we can do a capability first model of thinking and create, with all the same things we have today, create a slightly different approach and calm the chaos of supply chain. This slide has a bunch of ways to contact me. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a website that's full of written stuff. So if you like video, YouTube. If you like written stuff, go to my website. If you like to see posts every now and again, follow me on LinkedIn. And if you want to see all the things related to me, there's that link at the bottom. And of course, every Friday I try and release a hashtag Smile Creator on LinkedIn. And I'm trying to shift from Smile Creator because there's a dentistry group in India that's kind of latched onto that. And I'm trying to do hashtag Laugh Generator. It's like one level up from Smile Creator is Laugh Generator. All right, so that's what I have. You can feel free to contact me, talk to me, ask me questions tonight, or send me an email. I do have a demand-driven planner class coming up, starts February 2nd. They're 4 hours a day times 4 days in a row. It's a little bit late to kind of share that, but there are, I try and do sessions every so often. That is basically 16 hours of training on the demand-driven methodology. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. If anybody's still awake.
I'm still awake. I don't have any questions yet, but I want to make sure that you know that you kept us all awake.
All right, awesome. That was my goal. Sorry about that.
I have a question. Where I'm currently at, we're more of a job shop. How would this kind of fall into that? Because, of course, we're on the as little inventory as possible, blah, 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 but it's more of a job shop. So uh, our inventory is very, very low. So how could I put this into use?
So great question. I'll stretch it out a little bit because where I worked, we used to say we were a job shop, but we made the same thing within, a few changes. We made the same stuff over and over, but we waited for the customer order before we started making it. So that was when I realized that, we're sort of make to order, just the trigger for starting production is the customer order. But there are also plenty of companies that are actually job shops that make items that are, when the order comes in, there's engineer to order, and then there's the some slight differences. So you look for common components. Uh, at the very base level, if you have bar steel or something like that, or aluminum tubing, that you cut into pieces and it goes into everything, that's a common piece. And we can figure out how much inventory we need to hold that's not directly related to the exact order coming, but allows you to have enough so that those orders can be made whenever they're realized. A lot of things like that are, just like the penguins, everything we make has this casting at its root, but it's machined differently. So the root casting, the raw material casting becomes the item you would buffer. But so in my situation, usually what I find is people say, hey, we don't buy anything we don't need or use right away. And then I look around at the walls and walls of inventory. I heard you say you've got low inventory to start with. Well, if you've got
Yes.
low inventory to start with, then it's a hard sell. But my opposite side of that is, if you've got too little inventory, because everybody's trying to push to lower inventory without regard to how much you actually need to stay in business, that's another problem. So what demand driven does is gives you a different methodology or a different thought process around figuring out what is that target inventory level. And if we agree, whether we use the methodology or some other way, if we agree that 100 is the minimum amount you should have, or the average amount you should have, then everybody knows if you have 90, don't reduce that one. But where we are today, at least in my experience, everybody had a different idea what was the right amount. And so you're stuck. You think you've got too little. They think you've got too much, and you're just fighting a losing battle all day long instead of doing the work you're trying to do.
Yep.
Does that help?
Very much. Thank you.
Awesome. What else? Who else has a question? Doesn't have to be presentation related. How did I get my hair to look like this?
There you go. Laugh generator again.
Natural. It's all natural. And I've removed all the mirrors in my house.
Wow. We either have a really shy group Or you
Or I
did
covered everything. I know I didn't
Yeah.
cover everything, so.
they now have all of the answers.
Actually, usually what happens is you have more questions, which is really my goal, is for you to think, well, is there something that I'm doing? In your case, is there something that you're doing where you think, man, maybe that wasn't the best approach or isn't the best approach? And those are the conversations I love to have. So again, whether it's tonight or some other time, if you say, man, I've been doing this and it's not really working, and I'm just now trying to dig into why it's not working. Because I've been in your shoes, I worked in those jobs, and the whole time you're just trying to keep moving. You don't really have time to stop and say, I wonder if there's a better way, because you're swamped. So hopefully this provides some kind of framework for you to say, maybe if I did something slightly differently, now we can have a conversation about it.
So along those lines, I've had a thought. So the examples that you shared were regarding like raw materials going into production of a finished good, right? Have you seen this kind of methodology applied to finished goods, thinking like distribution requirements planning?
It's a great question. Yes, this also works for distribution. And I can tell you whether it's retail scenarios or distribution warehouses. I'll give you this example. Caterpillar has been working on this for several years, and they figured out they went into Mexico because that's where the plants were volunteering. And all that they did was put buffers around the purchased finished goods. So the purchased items that they're holding to ship to in this case, their customers are the Caterpillar plants. The only thing they did was put buffers around those purchased finished goods, and they saw a reduction of inventory every month of $1.5 million, and it extended at least 15 months, while their on-time delivery got up to close to 98%. And for those of you in the Apex world, we have taught for years that the only way to achieve high on-time delivery is to have a boatload of inventory. And that turns out is not true. If you have and can figure out what is the right amount of inventory, you reduce the amount you have too much of, you increase the amount you have too little of, and overall, we see a 30% drop in inventory and in the on-hand inventory. Now, if you're already having too little, we're not going to see a 30% drop. But typically, because of the bullwhip, most companies have figured out, or most individuals have figured out how to kind of cheat the system and have more than enough because they've been burned so many times. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that. I don't need to give an example of that, but we go out of our way to make sure we have enough, and then we're the hero instead of being given the right tools to do the job. Great question. Yes, distribution, perfect. Easiest place to do it because you already have the lead time for the distribution center. You already have that. So very simple to implement there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wendy.
So right now, we're on an AS400 system, and we're only going to be on it for probably another 2.5 months, and then we're going live with SAP. We're anticipating glitches, and we want to make sure that we don't, how do I say, cut our customer short.
Right.
So this is a situation where we are building more inventory than we normally would. And this is the time of the year where we're slower because the construction season's during the summer. So although like in Phoenix, it's really high right now when we're selling to Phoenix, but at the same time, like in the Midwest, there just isn't a lot of construction going on. So we're making sure that we're hopefully going to be covered so that when we run into those glitches, we don't run out of inventory. But at the same time, like these slides you're showing, I'm not really going to see how some of that plays into effect until I'm actually in SAP. Because AS400 and SAP are like two totally different situations.
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot in that. So still, no matter what system you're using, you're trying to provide inventory for the customer, right? And in my experience, we spend all of our time trying to figure out, MRP tells us an answer, whether it's the AS400 or SAP. The MRP tells us, order this now. And then we spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what we should really order, because we know that's not going to be what we should order. You agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
So this is in some of my other presentations, I make some pretty bold statements like, we know MRP doesn't work because everybody takes the output from MRP and puts it into a spreadsheet and creates the fixed output. So if the difference is with DDMRP, we put the things that you put into fixing that output, we put that into the system so that the output can most of the time be trusted. And that it takes away all the chaos of looking at every part every day, trying to figure out what we should change it to. Doesn't completely fix everything, right? You still got to use your head. You still got to figure out how much inventory do I need to fulfill this demand. But SAP has built into it, it may be an add-on, I'm not sure, excuse me, but it has demand-driven MRP built into it. If it's an add-on, it costs more than it needs to, and often the people who are implementing haven't really implemented it before, so they don't really understand what's happening. But consider, and we could figure out what this looks like, some kind of training around this demand-driven methodology. And I'll just encourage you to go look at my YouTube channel. There's an 1 hour and 40-minute video that I try and jam as much as I can about how this works into an 1 hour and 40 minutes, and it's free. And if you look at that and go, okay, I see a benefit for this, reach out to me, let's talk how we can, just have a discovery session. It's a discussion around how this would work in your business. Because the fun part about demand driven is that it's a framework that fits almost everywhere, but it doesn't fit everywhere the same. And so there's still some thought processes you have to do. MRP is MRP, right? The equations from MRP haven't changed for 70 years. We've added bells and whistles and we've done other stuff, but really the basic equations haven't changed. But DDMRP, figuring out where those positions of inventory should be, how much we want to hold there, how we do our calculations, all of that stuff is slightly different for every company, and even different sections of the same company, because it doesn't just work when you throw the software in there. You got to understand what's happening. And this is, to me, one of the big advantages of demand driven is we share with you all the math. It's fifth grade math at best. So there isn't a black box with it, this gets in there and then eventually there's a fortune cookie that comes out and it's got your fortune in it. You understand, if I change the lead time, if I change the average daily usage, if I change a variability coefficient, this is what makes a change in how much I'm holding, not whether or not I can meet that particular order, but whether or not my capabilities have increased to be able to handle orders of that size. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's helpful. What platform did you say that was on? Our presentation, whatever?
So the software that I have is WA Solutions from Colombia, South America. But if you look at, I don't have the link in there, demanddriveninstitute.com. There's about 50 softwares out there that implement this methodology. SAP is built in naturally. Microsoft Dynamics is built in. Most of the rest of us are bolt-ons, right? So you pull out the data we need, which isn't really that complicated, put it into our system, and we generate, here's the POs you should order, and then we figure out how we got to put that back into your system where the POs are generated, if it's POs that we're dealing with. Work orders, manufacturing orders if we're producing, or distribution if it's distribution.
Thank you.
Yes. A lot of resources in this. If it was intriguing, I am also a resource. Just give me a phone call or shoot me an email. Happy to have whatever discussions make sense. All right, we're 5 minutes over, and you guys didn't believe me that I was going to be here for 3 hours, did you?
I was a little worried they might have thought that was a fact. They don't know you quite as well as I do.
Oh, well. I try and make things fun if possible. So here's I don't know if I'll end on this, but I'll throw this out as well. The other day I was thinking about positioning and inventory positioning and where do we do positioning? And I think I wrote an article for my newsletter, which is coming out early February, but I thought about baseball, right? There's no presentation in the world that's ever been complete until we do a sports analogy of some kind. I thought about baseball and I thought more about the outfield. And right there, so they do some research and they know that this batter is likely to hit to the left or to the right or whichever. But they don't know exactly where the ball is going to land, but they position themselves to be within some reasonable range that they might catch the ball if it's hit in the air. It would be ridiculous to assume that the outfielder could pick his spot, stick his arm in the air, and catch the ball without moving. It would be equally ridiculous for the outfielder to sit on the bench until the ball is hit and then run out there. This is exactly what we're doing with our inventory, is we're putting it where it looks like it's going to allow us to do whatever it is we're trying to do. And it makes so much sense to me. And everywhere I look, though it took me 7 years to figure out the baseball analogy, it's everywhere we look. We position ourselves. If I'm going to the theater and I'm going out to dinner first, I'm going to eat dinner near the theater. So if something goes wrong with dinner, I'm right across the street from where the theater is. These are things we do in our daily lives. And we should just how can we incorporate that into the way we're managing our supply chains so that most of the time we're not in chaos. And I would argue that the way we work today, most of the time we're going to find chaos, and only occasionally are we going to find ourselves without chaos. And it's not comforting to think that. So I had to get out of it and start spreading the word this way. Does that analogy resonate? Does that make sense?
Very much.
Awesome. Not everybody plays baseball, but it's the same argument. Soccer, football, right? Everything's the same. It's all positioning to have a chance at making the play or doing the thing right. Where you take a picture from matters. So everything is about positioning. Maybe we can figure out how, maybe it's inventory positioning, maybe it's staffing, maybe it's resources. How many resources do you guys manage that are, your goal is to have them running 100% of the time? We used to have that, yeah, boy, we spent a lot of money on that. That should be running. Well, no customer is buying what that machine makes. Doesn't matter, run it. And the number of times in my career that I said, just wait until the raw materials get here, but just be ready. And somebody else came along and forced them to run something. And then when the urgent thing that we absolutely needed right now came in, they weren't ready. They, well, we'll get to it tomorrow. Really? This is the thing customers are paying for, is taking a back seat so that the machine can keep running for some logic that I've failed to understand. All about capability first is my today's statement.